Hi, and welcome to InFocus. This is Jabbar Al-Obaidi. In this episode, we'll be talking about the war between Iran, the United States, and Israel. My guest in this episode is Dr. Nader Habibi, who's an Iranian American economist and Henry J. Lear Professor of Practice in the Economics of the Middle East at Brandeis University in Massachusetts. Thank you, Dr. Nader Habibi, for joining in Focus. First of all, I would like to, ask about your family and your relatives there in the homeland, Iran.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Obaidi. Thank you for this opportunity. It's difficult for everyone. I have relatives in Tehran, in Mashhad, in Hamadan, and friends in many cities, distant relatives in many cities. And almost the entire country has been impacted because if you look at the list of targets of aerial bombardment, it covers nearly more than 100 cities that have been affected by this recent episode, which is on its 13th day. And the society is also feeling the economic impact already. There were attacks on a number of fuel depots that resulted in panic and shortage of fuel, and government had to ration that. So far, other economic aspects of the country are functioning, but my family, fortunately, everyone is okay.
I'm
And
glad to
I'm
hear that.
happy to go into details of the economic conditions as we continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that about your family. A lot of course, questions about the Strait of Hormuz. Could you enlighten our audience about the importance, strategic importance of this strait?
Sure. So, Strait of Hormuz is important because all the countries around the Gulf are major oil and natural gas producers. And nearly something between 15 to 20 million barrels of oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz. The production of Qatar, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, all of these have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So we are talking about three very important commodities. Crude oil, obviously, very significant for global economy, and the amount flowing through the Strait of Hormuz is about 20% of total. Then we have natural gas. One of the most important producers of natural gas in the world is Qatar. That commodity is converted into liquefied natural gas and transported from Qatar to Asia and Europe. And again, Qatar is a producer of almost 20% of natural gas in the world. So these two by themselves as two essential energy commodities are very important. But in addition to those, many countries around the Gulf are producers of petrochemical products, diesel, jet fuel, all kinds of petrochemical products that are important for plastic industry, for agricultural fertilizers. So we have seen disruptions in all of these three. And that's why the global economy is so concerned about what is happening. As far as the economies of the region are concerned, they themselves depend on the Strait of Hormuz and also on the stability of the region. United Arab Emirates, Qatar, are two major transit hubs for aviation. A large number of travels between Europe and Asia go through the airports in Qatar or United Arab Emirates. So that has been disrupted. Not only it has affected their economies, but it has affected the global economy in terms of travel. The United Arab Emirates and other countries around the region, the stable GCC countries, are also tourism destinations, with Saudi Arabia being a country that has recently invested heavily in its tourism. Tourism has been impacted severely as these countries have come under attack uh, by missiles and the drones that Iran has directed at them. So the local economies are affected. Currently, production of natural gas, uh, oil, crude oil in many countries has been interrupted significantly. Iran itself cannot export. Saudi Arabia has halted exports. So the impact on the region is very significant, and the impact on global economy is also very significant.
So, what are the most or the countries? I know the region and everything that you just explained to us,
Yeah,
but what are the countries that significantly have been impacted already
sure.
by this conflict?
You're asking about global economy, correct?
Yes, yes. Yeah, like
Surely,
what are the countries that now
right.
they feel the heat of this conflict?
Of course. The most dependent countries on energy supplies of the region are Asian countries. Think about China. Nearly 40% of crude oil imports come from the Persian Gulf region. India, almost about 40%. And they are also significant importers of natural gas. Uh, India, for example, relies on natural gas imports from Qatar for its fertilizer production and agriculture. And we are approaching the planting season in India for agriculture, and they are already feeling a severe shortage of fertilizer production because the supply has been interrupted. China, India, Japan, Korea are major importers of crude oil. Taiwan, not only importer of crude oil, but also, again, heavily dependent on natural gas. Now, these countries have strategic reserves of crude oil.
Mm,
China, for example, has a substantial amount.
mm,
That's why, in the short run, they are cautiously uh, able to use that reserve if needed. And I think they are beginning to use that. But if this crisis continues for more than a month,
mm,
those reserves are also going to be depleted. And then when we turn to Europe, Europe is also equally dependent. Because for a long time, Europe was dependent on both Middle East and Russia. But after the 2002 Ukraine war, which is still ongoing, the supplies of oil and natural gas from Russia have been disrupted, significantly diminished, and for some countries, practically zero. And as a result, they have become more dependent on the Gulf region. So they are also in a very difficult condition right now, and that's why we see that their leaders are criticizing the United States very heavily for initiating this war and also for not anticipating the severe consequences. The country that has been impacted least directly is the United States, because the United States is a major producer of oil and natural gas. And as a result, because it has some capacity for export, it might even benefit from the high prices of these commodities. Today, President Trump directly mentioned that the price of our natural gas and oil that we export is going to appreciate, and that will benefit us. Another positive impact of this on U.S. oil and gas sector is that the cost of oil production in United States is relatively high, especially the shale oil production. But if the price of crude oil approaches 100 and it stays around 100, then it becomes more profitable to produce more oil in the United States, and we are going to see an increase.
So you already actually today, when I say today is Thursday, March 12th,
Correct.
2026. They said the price actually exceed $100.
Yes, yes, it has, because the crisis is escalating. And if it continues, especially if the attacks on tankers continue and we go into a more escalation, for example, more oil fields and more refineries come under attack, then the price will spike even higher, because it will take longer to complete the repairs and restore production. Therefore, the markets anticipate that even if after escalation the hostilities end and the Strait of Hormuz is open for transport again, it will still take a while for production to come back to normal. Therefore, the supply would be below current levels for several months.
So who is the party that really, in terms of the escalation, but who is the party going to hit, let's say, the oil field, the refineries in the Gulf area or in Iraq, or isn't Iran
Yes. It would be Iran in retaliation for U.S. and Israeli attacks, meaning that it can escalate in the following procedure. If the United States decides to occupy or destroy the Khark terminal
Mm,
as a way of stopping Iran's exports, then Iranians, as long as they have any missiles and drones left, we don't know how many Iran has currently, are likely to retaliate, because they have already demonstrated that they are willing to retaliate by reciprocity. You target one type of infrastructure in our country, we will target the rest of it. Now, it is really puzzling, and I think in a way, not in the interest of Iran to attack the neighboring countries,
mm.
but because of the current unique situations in Iran's governance, and we can go into details of this later, the military forces are operating in sort of semi-autonomy, and I think some of them are not looking at the long-term adverse consequences of these attacks on the Persian Gulf region territorial states for Iran. Because, in my opinion, if
Mm.
these attacks on Iraq in other Gulf countries continue, it could provoke a response against Iran, which would be very severe, and it could endanger Iran even more than where it stands today. But right now, the Iranian military strategies are just focused on reciprocity as the only way of perhaps putting pressure on President Trump so that he might halt the war.
Now, yeah, I mean, you're right. The Arab Gulf states, I mean, you got to give them credits. They didn't really always, because they would like to have this friendship relation with a big country like Iran,
Yes.
and they, especially Qatar and Sultan Oman, they played a positive role in terms of trying to advocate for a peaceful solution. Weren't they? Aren't they?
And they are. They are clearly, they tried Oman, for example, Qatar. have a history of trying to mediate. And we saw that before the war started, all GCC countries repeatedly called on United States not to carry out an attack. There's no doubt because they were anticipating that it can escalate into the current situation. Now, Iran started these attacks by primarily focusing on the United States military assets. And they argued that this is a war, and these bases that the United States has in various countries are a part of American military infrastructure. But we are witnessing these attacks going beyond those military
Mm.
assets. Initially, they argued that the reason is that the United States has housed its military personnel in hotels in civilian areas. But now we're seeing that this is more of a, I think, pressure technique by trying to put pressure on Gulf countries by retaliating. For example, we have seen drone attacks on high-rise residential buildings and commercial buildings. That really goes beyond military target. You cannot justify that as military target. It can just be perhaps categorized as trying to punish these countries for hosting the U.S. military assets.
So, thank you for that. So today, the new Murshid, the Ayatollah
Supreme
Khamenei,
leader.
he delivered first, I think, recorded speech, uh, and I think he highlighted the importance of the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
How significant is his actually speech in terms of escalating or de-escalating the war?
Sure. It was not a recorded voice message, it was a written message.
A written
And
message,
right
yes.
now in
Thank you for
Iran,
correcting me.
yes, in Iran, there is, I mean, observers of Iran and inside Iran, people are waiting to actually see him as a proof of life, that he is alive and he is functioning. But there has been no appearance in media yet. Nevertheless, this message is important because his message was a message of continuation of Iran's current strategy, meaning closure of the Strait of Hormuz and continuation of attacks on U.S. military assets in the region, and also continuation of attacks on Israel. So this means that it was not some kind of a conciliatory message. It was a message of resolve to continue the war from Iran's point of view. And I think the objective is to put pressure on United States to accept some kind of ceasefire or cease the attacks on Iranian economy and infrastructure.
Well, what do you think? I mean, what are the, let's say, three, four demands that they might be of importance to the Iranian government that they will say, okay, we will accept this deal for a ceasefire?
I don't
In
know.
your
So far,
opinion, yeah, in your opinion, I
sure,
mean, just
sure,
like
sure, sure.
from
There isn't
economic
a,
point of view and also
of
from
course,
like general assessment.
of course. No, the reason I said I don't know is because the Iranian government so far has not offered a list of demands itself. It has even said on a couple of occasions that we are not going to even accept a ceasefire. We are going to, because they believe that now they are in a position of revenge because of the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei and the severity of the attacks on military and security structure. So I think the clearly the minimum demand that they will consider is that all these aerial attacks on Iran would be come to an end. That is the very minimum. But in addition to that, I think they would ask for a guarantee that such attacks will not happen again. Now, how they can achieve that is not clear, but the thinking in Iran is that we have been in this situation of sporadic attacks and occasional attacks by Israel, by United States for several years. This cannot go on forever. Therefore, we have to really bring this to a final point of either we would be victorious and or we would be martyred and we would be defeated. So there was this preparation for a major conflict even before it began on February 28th. And so I think um, if we are at a point of negotiation, Iran would demand more than just a ceasefire. It would demand certain cessation of hostilities at a larger basis.
Who do you think, in your opinion, uh, probably the most effective players in terms of mediating between the parties to get to the point
Yes,
when they have either, just temporary ceasefire or something that permanent?
right. I think uh, Oman still can play a role. Despite everything that has happened, there have been two attacks on oil facilities and tankers on Oman. But still, I think if Iran asks them, they might be willing to play a role. Maybe Russia, as a country that has had good relations with Iran, but Putin has also had good communications with President Trump. They had a long conversation a couple of days ago, so they might be able to play a role. But at this point, it's not about the mediators, but it's more about the resolve and decision of both parties in this conflict. Clearly, in terms of military victory, the US and Israel have the upper hand. The amount of damage has been very severe, but the current rulers in Iran are willing to accept that kind of severe damage, but continue this conflict. Because the US demand so far has always been to surrender, and they are not in a position to surrender in current conditions.
But do they, I mean, surrender? I think that's impossible. I mean, giving
Correct.
the history and, the experience. I mean, what's the definition of surrender, like for Iranians, or
Yes.
also for us here in the United States?
Yeah, I think they see it, and I think President Trump sees it as similar to a conventional war, where when one side is defeated and they send a delegation and sign a treaty of peace and surrender, similar to what happened to Japan, perhaps in World War II. But that is unlikely to happen because this regime cannot survive if it does so. We have to keep in mind that we have a situation in Iran where majority of people are opposed to this regime.
Mhm.
And just about 6 weeks ago, there was a series of protests, and the regime suppressed that by a massive killing. Very, very unprecedented. Large number of civilians were killed, and even the government officials acknowledged these massive killings. So now there is a significant amount of tension between, I would say, about 75 to 80% of the people who oppose this regime and the supporters of the regime. And during past
So
2 weeks,
70%?
I believe so. I believe
Okay.
it's about 70% at minimum who are truly opposed to the regime. Uh, and we saw that the leaders of Israel and United States repeatedly called on them and said, rise, or they said, get ready to rise. And even now, still, there is this speculation in Iran that at some point there might be a call by opposition leaders, especially the son of former Shah, along with President Trump, for an uprising.
Thank you, Dr. Nader Habibi, for your time and for providing us with valuable information about what's going on in the Middle East. And thank you for watching In Focus. This is Jabbar Al-Obaidi. We'll see you next week.